right, so here we have an example problem, right? 1 over n plus 1 plus 1 over n is equal to 11 over n squared plus n. So to start out, we want to find our lowest common denominator. Let me do that on some scratch paper here. And so how do we do that? Well, we're going to list out our denominators of the fractions, right? So we have n plus 1, we have n, and we also have n squared plus n. Now, n squared plus n can be factored, right? So let's go ahead and factor it out. We got n plus 1 comma n, and we also have n parentheses n plus 1. So I'm factoring out an n here, and we get n plus 1. Right? So looking at all these, what is the lowest common denominator? Well, you could see that it is n times n plus 1. And why is it n times n plus 1? Because this expression has our first denominator in it, n plus 1 as a factor. It has our second denominator in it, n as a factor. And it also has our third denominator in it, n times n plus 1 as a factor, right? So this is our lowest common denominator. All right, so let's go ahead and use it then over here in our problem, right? Now that we found our lowest common denominator, we're going to multiply both sides of the equal sign by that LCD. So let's do that. N times n plus 1. And I'm just going to do it shorthand by putting a parentheses around the entire equation. Plus 1 over n is equal to 11 over n squared plus n, like so. All right. So let's go ahead and distribute out to every term in the equation, right? So we get n times n plus 1 over n plus 1 plus n times n plus 1 over n is equal to 11n times n plus 1 over, and this denominator right here, I'm going to write it in its factored form, n times n plus 1. Right? All right. So now that we have multiplied out the lowest common denominator to every term in the equation, we're going to look for common factors to cancel out. We have an n plus 1 and an n plus 1. Those guys are going to cancel out. We have an n and an n. Those cancel out. We have an n and an n. Cancel out. And an n plus 1 and an n plus 1. Those cancel out. So now what are we left with? We have n plus 1 is equal to 11. All right, so that cleaned up nicely. Now we'll combine our like terms, and we'll have 2n plus 1 is equal to 11. Subtract 1, and we get 2n is equal to 10, divided by 2, and n is equal to 5, and we're done. Right? So over here, n is equal to 5. Let's see if I can squeeze in the next problem in this video. Yeah, looks like you can do it. So what do we have next? We're here, and we want to find the LCD, right? So what is the LCD? The LCD, let's go ahead and do it. Maybe I could do it here on the side. So the LCD, to find it, I'm going to go ahead and take my denominators. So x squared minus 1 is one of my denominators, and I have x minus 1 is one of my denominators. This one here can be factored, right, using difference of squares, right? Do you remember that? It's a squared minus b squared is equal to a plus b times a minus b. And so do we have a perfect square in our first term? Yes. Perfect square in our second term? Yes. Is there a minus sign? Yes. So we can use this form. So what is this going to factor out to? It's going to be a is x, and our b is 1. All right? So it's a plus 1 times a minus 1. So what are the denominators here? Is going to be, this is one of the denominators in its factored form. This is the second denominator. And if we look at the two, we can see that the LCD is going to be x plus 1 times x minus 1. Right? It has the first denominator as one of its factors, right? The entire expression. And it has the second denominator as one of its factors. So we have our LCD. Great. So let's go ahead now and multiply the original equation by that LCD. So it's going to be x plus 1 times x minus 1 times the entire equation. Okay, so now we're distributing out, and we get x plus 1 times x minus 1 times x plus 3 over. And now I'm going to write this denominator in its factored form, right, using the difference of squares method. So it's x plus 1, x minus 1. And so now I'm moving on to the second distribution here. And so I get 2x times x plus 1 times x minus 1 over x minus 1. And then lastly, I got these two guys. So that's going to be x plus 1 times x minus 1, like so. Okay, so let's go ahead and cancel out common factors. So we got that one and that one. We got x plus minus 1 and x minus 1. Over here we have x minus 1 and x minus 1, and we don't have any on the right side of the equal sign. So let's rewrite our equation. It's going to be x plus 3 minus 2x times x plus 1 is equal to x plus 1 times x minus 1. So now things are going to get a little messy here. Let's go ahead and work it out. We're distributing out, so we get x plus 3 minus 2x squared minus 2x is equal to, so what did I do? I distributed out the negative 2x, right? Could get 2x squared. And then distribute out here, I got negative 2x. We do the same over here. I'm going to FOIL out that right side of the equal sign. So it's x squared minus 1. Alright, so now I'm going to move everything to the left side of the equal sign and combine my like terms and rewrite it in standard form. Right, we should have a quadratic expression that we can set equal to 0 and solve for. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to move this to the left side of the expression. So it's going to be negative 2x squared. I'm combining these two like terms, so it's going to be negative x plus 3 is equal to x squared minus 1. Now I'm subtracting my x squared and I'm adding the 1. I'm moving both of these terms to the left side of the equal sign. So that's minus x squared, and I'm adding 1. Right? So we get negative 3x squared minus x plus 4 is equal to 0. And now we need a factor. Alright, so how do we factor? Well, remember, we're going to use our x method. It's a times c. Well, a times c, so it's negative 3 times 4. It's negative 12, and our b, negative 1 in the bottom. But remember that since our a is not 1, right, since we have a coefficient other than 1, we need to do our fraction, negative 3x, on both sides. Alright, now what two numbers multiply to 12 add up to negative 1? That's going to be 4 and 3. The 4 is going to be negative, right? Negative 4 and positive 3 multiply negative 12 and add to negative 1. This fraction over here can reduce to negative x over 3, and now we have our factors right here and here. Okay, so let's rewrite as our factors. It's going to be parentheses negative 3x minus 4 minus x plus 3 is equal to 0. And now we can set them both of our factors equal to 0 and solve for x. So what do we have? We have negative 3x minus 4 is equal to 0. And we have, let's go ahead and solve that. Plus 4 on both sides. We're going to get negative 3x is equal to 4 divided by negative 3. And we get x is equal to 4 over negative 3. Everything's all smushed together. But let's go and do the next one. It's negative x plus 3 is equal to 0. We'll subtract 3 from both sides. We get negative x is equal to negative 3. Divide by negative 1. And we get x is equal to positive 3. So we have x is equal to 4 over negative 3, and x is equal to 3. Right, so I'm coming over to here. X is equal to 4 over negative 3, and 3 is my final answer.